Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. We are really excited to dive into all about the virtual assistant industry. We've been in this space for nearly 20 years now. I know you've been in this space for a long time, and I think we have a lot of insights that we can share to our audience. So I'd love to start off by you just telling our audience about how and why you moved into the virtual assistant space. A little bit about your background would be great.
Sure thing. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I started my VA journey back in 2005, so almost 20 years now. And it was literally, I was really just going for a life change. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm going to be a virtual assistant. And I decided basically to quit my job, sell everything and book a one-way ticket out of the UK. Back then, and it led me, as soon as I left, it led me to just knowing I didn't want to go back to how life used to be, you know, like the 9 to 5 and being stuck in England and things like that. As much as I love England, I wanted to travel, I wanted to see other things. And then I started researching like what I could do potentially on the internet. And, you know, there wasn't that much around back then, as you guys know. It was pretty sparse, the things that you could do. And I came across this concept of working online and doing admin services online. And I thought, okay, that's something I can do. And that's basically how I started. So I basically quit everything, went cold turkey and started a VA business.
That's amazing. And yes, it was very few and far between almost 20 years ago. And here we are today, still thriving, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you have when you started your business, did you have a passion for business in the past? Like, how did you just decide I'm going to start a company, right? What were the back thoughts to that?
Well, it's really interesting because I do a lot of coaching and training with virtual assistants, and the basis and the premise is all around decide what lifestyle you want, and then a virtual assistant business will work around that. So for me, that was really the deciding point, that I wanted to have a lifestyle that I wanted to create for myself, no matter what that looked like. And that's basically how I came about to becoming a virtual assistant, because virtual assistants literally could have worked around any kind of lifestyle choice I made. It started off me wanting to travel. It then started to work around me starting a family. So I've got 5 kids now. I've been at home with all of them throughout this process. We've traveled to many different countries. I've lived in 7 countries as an expat long term. So I've had 5 kids in 4 different countries. So
wow.
It was really the pull on what kind of lifestyle do I want. And then I fell in love with virtual assistants because I just realized that no matter what anyone wanted to do as their dream lifestyle, there is a virtual assistant business or some form of virtual assistant business that would fit around that.
Yeah, I agree. I have 2 daughters, and when I started working remotely, that's what I didn't have them obviously then, but that's what I wanted, right? And we talked to our team too. What does success look like for you? It's different for everyone, and that's the beauty of the flexibility that this opportunity offers. I want to shift a little bit to now our listeners that are considering hiring a virtual assistant. What is the first piece of advice you would give them when they're thinking, do I need a virtual assistant? Where do I even start?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is for any client is to really know what result you want to achieve from working with that virtual assistant. Because like I say, there are many different types of virtual assistant out there now. The industry has evolved greatly, and most people, sometimes they're stuck in their mind of it's somebody who just answers emails or processes, you know, admin tasks and things like that. But there's a whole spectrum now. So it's really about deciding what is the purpose of this virtual assistant? Why am I hiring this virtual assistant? And what do I want to see at the end? And I think a really good tip is when you are searching for that perfect virtual assistant is to not worry too much about the tasks and can you do this task and, you know, have you got this skill? But it's knowing that in addition to that, the virtual assistant can really understand the vision and the outcome and the result that you want to achieve and can confidently say, I'm the best person to help you with this. So for me, that's always the ultimate. And it's always the first question I ask or want to know from a client is, what's your expectation here of your end result, your goal? What do you want to see happen? And oftentimes, you know, it's not about the service or the task. It's about just understanding, are we going to get the same result? Are we on the same page here?
Yeah, that's a really good answer. A lot of times the expectations are skewed too. They may think I just need someone to do email. And when you elaborate, the light bulb goes off. Oh my gosh, the opportunities are endless.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Michelle, I know that in our experience, most of our clients come to us, and when they're starting off with us, they wanted or needed a virtual assistant like weeks ago, and they've sort of reached that fever pitch. And it's really crucial for them that they have a strong, productive, efficient working relationship right off the bat. So how, in your opinion, can someone ensure that that happens just from day one?
I think this all comes, I have something called a pledge, which I've created, and it was for me, it was based on working with a lot of clients and also hiring a lot of virtual assistants to work in my team. And I realized there was always common issues or common problems arising from the relationship. You know, like sometimes they were very similar between clients, sometimes new ones would arise, but in the end, you realize, okay, this is because expectations weren't managed and boundaries weren't clearly communicated. So now I have something which I call a pledge, which is basically a document that I share with my clients. And I've listed out all of the things that they can expect from me when they're hiring me, all of the things that we need to expect from each other, you know, and we're talking about, you know, things like communication, mutual respect, the boundaries of when things are done, how things are done, how they've got to work with, you know, how we're going to work with each other and things. And then I have another list, which is the expectations that I have of them as my client. Now, if we can agree on this document up front and all of those boundaries and expectations are on the table from the offset, then that basically we step into that relationship where there's no misunderstandings, there's no he said, she said, you didn't tell me this type thing, I didn't know that was the case, or, you know, and I think a lot of VAs have trouble putting those boundaries in place because they don't want to upset the client, you know, they're worried they're going to lose the client and that type of thing. But if you can be really confident with that up front, I think you will get more respect from the client. So certainly when you're hiring a virtual assistant, you obviously want to respect that virtual assistant. So ask that VA, you know, what do you expect from me? What can I expect from you? And how are we going to work with each other in, you know, in this way? And I think that's setting things off on the right foot.
I really like that. And as you said, our VAs talk all the time. It is hard to set expectations. It is hard to be upfront with time turnarounds, right? If a client comes in with the expectation that my virtual assistant can get this done right now, they're not sharing any other clients, you're setting it up for failure, right? So communicating, making sure everything is bullet pointed, written down is a fantastic way to go.
It's true. And especially with the expectation management, you know, and I always allow that contingency myself, you know, if I think I can get something done in 48 hours, and I will tell the client 72 hours,
Right.
and hopefully I would have exceeded the client's expectations, which
Right.
is then keeping them happy, but it's also not putting myself under that pressure, and you get that harmonious balance between, in that relationship. Obviously, there are times when the client's going to put you under pressure and say, I really need this, and but you have to understand and put that in your pledge that you are willing to do that, but there is an overcharge, or like there's a quick time fee or something like that, so the client doesn't say, well, like, do that all the time, and that type of thing. It's really about mutual respect, if you can find that.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Along those lines, when you're thinking about communicating, virtually with the client, you're talking about, communicating expectations and in terms of the delegation. Do you have any tips for, how to communicate virtually? So you're not in the same office, you're not able to, just pop over and ask a question to your virtual assistant. What are your tips about that?
Well, this actually, for me anyway, and this is what I always advise with virtual assistants and clients, is that you establish who is the leader in the relationship and who is the learner. Okay, so that doesn't mean to say that the VA is constantly learning. Sometimes you can get a VA who leads, but sometimes you get a VA who learns. So what does this mean? In communication, especially when you are processing tasks, projects, anything like that, somebody has to take the lead in getting that complete. So we have, like, a lot of communication breakdown comes from this thing of, the client coming in and saying, have you done that? And the VA going, well, you never told me to do that. And, and then the client saying, but you didn't tell me you needed this from me to do that, and it comes up. But if you establish that leader from the beginning and that learner from the beginning, the learner is the one who's following the instructions of the leader. So if you come in and say to the VA, I need you to lead this project, then it's the VA's responsibility to come to you and ask when they need things, to chase you up and follow you up when they don't have something, to inform you when things are going to be delayed, or, like all of that stuff, to keep everything on track. And I think if you can establish you are the person responsible for that, then a lot of this communication issues where people don't really know what's going on, somebody's taking the lead. Now, sometimes that is not the VA. If the VA maybe is not ready to take that role in the relationship, they're more of a task-based VA. I take the lead in my business because all my clients work to a budget. So I have to manage that budget and I have to control what's happening and what I'm working on. But if you've got an hourly rate VA, for example, and you put them in the place of the learner, then the client has to take the role, and the client has to be the one going, where is this? Have you done this yet? I need to give you this. These are the instructions. Follow all these, So communication is very much about deciding up front, are you leading this or am I leading this? And then whoever is the leader has to be the one that has the primary communication, the follow-ups, the nudges. I need this, the to-do list, even down to the project management of being upfront about, okay, well, if we've got to do this and I need this, and this has got to be by that time. And, so it's basically making that decision of who's taking that role.
I like the way that you give that leader versus learner, because it is hard for VAs to understand as much as they can pull from the client, right? Should I have asked for this? Should I have not? What is my boundary line? So setting that right up front is clear. And so I loved that you put that on the table, because it's not something I've heard every day. Danielle, would you agree?
Yeah, I love that. And I haven't heard that before in all these years. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
I'm a big believer as well. If the client decides to delegate to the VA and say, okay, well, you take this off my plate, I'm leaving you in charge of all this, then you also have to understand that that VA is going to be nudging you, is going to be on your case. And I use a lot of, I don't know whether you guys use it too, unless I hear otherwise. So if I, if I'm trying to make decisions, trying to push a project through, I'll make a decision. And I may have asked the client maybe once or twice, can you get back to me on this, or I need this. I'll always use on the third time, look, unless I hear otherwise, this is what's happening. So again, if you are the client and you're the one that's deciding, well, I want everything done a certain way, so I'm going to lead the VA, then you also have to take control of that. And it helps with that blame game thing of, it didn't get done because of what,
Mm-hmm. And I think from the client side too, understanding that you hired your virtual assistant because you trust them, because you believe in them, they have the experience, the knowledge, the education to complete those tasks. And so, like you said, unless I hear otherwise, I think just trusting that that's going to get done and get done to your satisfaction.
Yeah. And one of the things which is actually in my pledge, and which I actually think is a really important part of communication, is that every communication between the client and myself is recorded. Either it's written or it's recorded on a video. So again, it's very, very clear about the expectations and what's happening going forward and things like that. And when you record everything, there have been clients that will say, well, oh, you never said that to me. But also on the flip side, there is also clients who ask virtual assistants things and the virtual assistant says, well, you never told me that. But if everything is recorded, then we don't need to dig down into these conversations about, did I say that or not? So I think in terms of communication, for me anyway, communication is always recorded in some shape or form.
I don't think we've mentioned that on our series yet. So we've been doing a whole VA series to enlighten our listeners on the industry, and we do the same. Everything is documented in the account folder. Everything is uploaded to their account folder. So I don't think we've mentioned it. So thank you for bringing it front of face for everyone, because that is really important. It eliminates all that back end time to say, well, what did we say last week? Well, let's just check the notes. Where is it located in the account folder? So it's a really helpful running list. So there are no miscommunications, even though they happen.
Mm-hmm.
Danielle, do you have any questions for Michelle before we start to wrap up about being a CEO?
Yeah, I'd love to just hear, we've talked a lot about, positive experiences and how things have worked well. Are there any pitfalls that you see when working with a virtual assistant and how a client can combat them? So any disadvantages or things to look out for?
I would say probably the main one, obviously, if you've done your due diligence and you've hired the right VA for you, you've hired someone who understands your vision, who's got the skills and experience that you need, you get on well with that person, you've got a good rapport with them, you're gonna go in there thinking, okay, well, this is great, everything's gonna be great. But I think what happens is even the best virtual assistants and even the most perfect matches of virtual assistant are still not you. Okay, so if you are a client and you've got these visions in your head of how you've been doing things and the expectations of how things should look and feel and come out at the other end, there are going to obviously be some slight differences in some cases as to the end result. And I think what a lot of clients need to kind of take on board is that it might have to let go a little bit. You might have to let go. Maybe the VA does know better than you. Maybe it will be a better outcome if you step back and allow that VA to do her job. So I think in terms of the pitfalls, if you're a super micromanager, super perfectionist, like everything done your way or the highway, even the best VAs are still not you. And you might have to step back a little bit and just understand that they know how to do their job, and they may even be able to bring something to the table and make improvements if you allow that to happen. So relax and let go a little bit. I know it's not necessarily a pitfall if somebody doesn't do things exactly as you do them, but somebody may see it that way. And I think this is a really good exercise, especially if it's not just one person you're hiring, but maybe you're starting to hire a team of people to work in different areas of your business as you grow and expand. You've got to learn to kind of let someone, work with someone and let them take the lead. And, that doesn't mean to say that things won't be as you want them, but they may not be down to every single last micro detail. Exactly that. So let go and, enjoy the process.
Yeah,
it can be hard. It definitely can be hard.
I will tell clients oftentimes, just what you said, in terms of, that person, your VA is not going to do it exactly like you would. And in a lot of cases, that's a good thing. They might be able to do it faster or more efficiently, cheaper. They might have a way to automate it. So, being limited to, this is how I've always done it, this is how I know it works, especially with the way, the technology and platforms are rapidly evolving, that's not always the best case.
Yeah.
And I would say we also train our VAs to recognize that behavioral style. So if the VA can recognize what type of behavioral style the client has or what type of working style the client has, they can more easily recognize, okay, this CEO is going to be a little bit harder to let go of the tasks. Maybe I should put XYZ into place. Or this CEO definitely wants to be the leader and definitely wants to take charge. So being able to recognize those things as a VA, something we train our team on, because it's helpful, right? It's helpful to be able to recognize off the gate, this is the type of style I'm working with. And it takes a little bit of the pressure off, I think, when you can recognize it.
Yeah. And I think that comes full circle around to what we were talking about at the beginning, is the most important thing is that the VA understands your vision and the result you want and the outcome. And, obviously everything is going to fall into place at some part of that, even if it's not every single tiny little detail, but usually things are, and from my case anyway, when a client comes to me and says, oh, this is what I've been doing, you can make suggestions, you can, gently sort of, choose a VA who's going to challenge you a little bit, and it's not a pitfall, it's going to improve your business if you've got that.
So being a CEO, what advice would you give to other CEOs listening? What's the best piece of advice you could give them?
I think this comes back to every CEO, to make this universal, not just with virtual assistants, but for me, it's all about really loving what you do. And because when you love what you do, it's not just a job, it's not just a way to make money, it's not just, coming in and clocking in at 9 o'clock and leaving at 5 o'clock. It becomes that way of life, and you do it for a reason that's beyond the work. And I think that really does make an extraordinary CEO, because they're basically dedicating their passion to their work. And I think that just creates that ultimate je ne sais quoi that is not present, and people are just treating it like a job. Oh, I'm organized and I'm good at managing and things like that. That's great, but do you love it? That's the big question.
So does the phrase "not your average CEO" mean the same thing to you as your advice, or does it mean something a little different?
Yeah. To me, an average CEO is someone who's, worked up the ranks, done a good job, able to manage people, able to be organized, able to do tasks and things like that. That's one side of the job. But when you can come in with that other side of the job, which is in a more creative way, as in how can I do something with this? How can I be more creative with this? How can I, when you love something, you obsess over it a little bit more than somebody who doesn't, and I think if you can marry that passion and obsession with your work, it creates not an average CEO. That's a very above average CEO. It's an extraordinary combination and mix. And I think you can see that in so many CEOs that are prominent and present in social media and things like that. You know, when you're looking at people like Tony Robbins and Gary Vaynerchuk and all these big names, Lewis Howes, you know, they're essentially managing their company. They're essentially running their company, but they're doing it with love, you know, and it shows in everything. And that's why they're so successful.
Yeah, I would agree. It definitely is very easy to spot when someone loves what they do.
Exactly.
It's written all over their face.
And, you know, and I think to myself as well, it brings so much color to being a CEO as opposed to those shades of gray that so many people are used to, which is, you know, the average.
Yeah. Danielle, do you have any last minute questions for Michelle?
No, I think that was great. When you gave us so many insights, and especially, you know, seeing what you've seen over your past several decades and the changes in the industry, it's been great.
Thank you so much.
Can you tell our audience where they can hear and see more from you?
Yeah, sure. So you can go to virtualmissfriday.com, which is where you'll find everything about me. I've created a virtual co-working space on there, which you can go and check out, which is primarily for virtual assistants. But for clients, there's also my services there and my business model, which is called One Sourcing. So everything's on the website, and all the links to my social media, if you'd like to connect, are in the footer.
Thank you so very much, Michelle.
Thank you.